Well, that's fun. So I did a whole 15-minute chat about the hero's journey and overcoming obstacles, yada yada yada. And I recorded the whole thing with no audio. So let's do this for a second time. So I was gonna chat for a minute about the fall of the West, or the degeneracy of the left, and the left and the right, and we're gonna chat a little bit about uh, the Bonnie Blue lady and her claim to fame being sleeping with 1,000 men, and I've been planning to kind of go over this video for a while now, and in that time Charlie Kirk has been murdered, and now that's everywhere, as kind of you would expect it to be, whether you uh, agree or disagree with the things that he said or stood for, believed in. Um, I really don't know that much about him as a person. I've seen clips of him, uh, kind of like those gotcha moments, gotcha clips kind of deal, much like other, you know, political entertainers. Um, and today's the first day of the government shutdown because in America, I don't know where you're from watching this, um, have a government shutdown today started, that our politicians, our leaders who are elected to lead our country, are not helping the common man. There's a lot of people that would say, uh, you know, Bonnie Blue, she's not American, she's British, I think, somewhere over there, across the pond, as they say. Um, a lot of people would point to that and say, hey, that's what's wrong with our society. You shouldn't be doing that. 1,000 people, what's wrong with you? Yada, yada, yada. You know, I'll tell you, it's not my business what that woman does with her body. Um, she's not. She's not even American. Like, that's across the pond. Um, I do wonder what the men who slept with her. I think she only sleeps with men. She may sleep with women as well. Um, but you know, if 1,000 men have been with this lady, and you're number 1,001, are you consciously aware of like all the potential problems that could come from that? I don't know. Strange. Um, I would encourage any person not to take up that kind of behavior, but at the same time, it's, like I say, it's not my place to tell people. And then the Charlie Kirk murder. Um, the things that he said and the things that he stood for, um, which my interpretation is he's a political entertainer, so you don't really know what he stood for. He were paid to say the majority of things that he said. That's what entertainers do. Um, he did, like most entertainers have, he had a large following, and he had other people that didn't care for him. Uh, but as an American, we have the Constitution, and your First Amendment right is to say whatever you want to. And I'm not absolutist. First Amendment absolutist. Like, you should be able to say whatever you want to. Uh, people could argue with what you're saying, and that's fine and good. But to murder someone, uh, I assume he was murdered for what he said. Could be wrong, could be other reasons. Uh, I don't really buy into the FBI's narrative that he was murdered by the guy who they arrested, because this is the third guy that they arrested. Strange. Um, but there will be some people that'll say that his murder is a sign of Western, the fall of the West. The ability to speak freely, um, which really you've been able to speak freely to a certain point, but there has always been political violence based on what you say. Um, I mean, American history. Ask the British about American history. How we got here. Uh, Rebellion. Um, some people say taxes. Some people say other things. And then that kind of leads into our current political leaders constantly bickering about the other guy, about the person across the aisle. And I kind of lean towards this is where those things, the fall of the West comes from. Not from a woman sleeping with 1,000 men, not for a man saying things you don't like, but our leaders not leading. Um, you know, it's baffling that these people ask for your vote. They want you to put faith in them to do the right thing for their constituents, and then they shut down the government because they can't find a middle ground. And that's just bizarre. They would expect we citizens to find a middle ground, to get along, to make things work. But for some reason, they feel that they're above it. And that to me is bizarre. Um, like, like the other two people that I talked about, Bonnie Blue and Charlie Kirk, two people which I don't really know anything about beyond the headlines. Uh, our leaders, you know, I'm from central Louisiana, so that's what I'm more familiar with. Um, they volunteered to be leaders, and they're, from my perspective, are doing a poor job. Um, if you want to lead, you have to lead. You can't constantly be saying it's the other guy's fault, because whenever it comes down to it, we're Americans and we're supposed to take care of one another and take care of one another to a point where you don't have to constantly be worrying about uh, being laid off or fired, or if they're going to make a bad trade deal and wipe out your whole business. Because I see that a lot in the headlines right now of small business owners are not able to weather the tariffs, and you know it's wiping out their businesses. If you're a small business owner and you're doing well, that's great. Uh, there's others that have been doing well, and they're being crushed right now. I know there's quite a few farmers. Farm bankruptcies are up at an alarming rate, and that's you know the backbone of America. You know, feeding Americans, and you know the decisions that our leaders are making. It's not making logical sense. uh, and, and I don't think that they come from a point of malice, but I'm not sure that they've thought it through from beginning to end either. You know, just being a common man or common woman, citizen out there, you know, you don't really have to think about 3 months down the road very often. But as a leader of, a group of people, some smaller groups, some have to think about the country as a whole, and then the world as a whole. Being America, we're kind of the leaders of the world almost, most of the world, and it's just bizarre watching what's going on, and I don't know if people pay attention to it. A lot of people see things and they don't say anything because what good will it do? How will it help the situation? Um, but it's kind of my pondering for the day. Why our leaders tell us to get along and play nice together, but they don't do the same thing. Uh, and it could all be a facade. Um, because well, it just could be. Um, Political corruption has always been a thing. Um, those in power want to keep power, and those without want to gain it. And if you've never read Robert Greene, his book, The Laws of Human Nature, I would highly recommend that. Anything by Robert Greene, pretty much. Um, my favorite author by far. But in a lot of his books, he references to situations throughout history that reinforces his argument, and that could be the kind of the same deal. Our politicians could be kind of taking advantage of the situation, and there's one in particular. You know, Pope Alexander the Sixth's son, Cesare Borgia. There's a story about him where he was taking over a city, and the populace of the city were not happy with him being their leader. So he sent a sheriff in to be overly brutal to them. And this went on for months, and it was getting kind of to a boiling point where the populace was starting to rebel. And Cesare went into the city and he spoke to the people and said, "He's here now. He'll investigate where the problem was." So he did some investigating, and it turns out the sheriff was the problem. So he cut the sheriff in half and put his two halves of his body on pikes in front of the city gates. And the populace was thrilled that Cesare came and solved the problem, and they weren't being brutalized anymore. But what they weren't aware of in the moment is that Cesare sent the sheriff to the city to brutalize them. And I think a lot of people miss that in our society, where people in power or people who are pulling strings will create a problem, then they will pretend to solve the problem that they created, and then they'll be the saviors. And yeah. kind of funny, kind of not funny, but very true. Anyway, if you watch this all the way to the end, good job. You got a longer attention span than most, and that might be important in the days to come. Anyway, take care.